for May 25th, 2022. Would you all stand for pledge allegiance to the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, is your speaker on?
I believe so.
Is it got the green light?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spence, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bernuti,
Here.
Ms. Goodwin-Dye,
Present.
Mr. Griffiths,
Here.
Mr. Huntington,
Present.
Mr. Willis,
Here.
Mr. Martin,
President.
and Dr. Stevens Gunn is excused this evening. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum to conduct business this evening.
Thank you. We have an approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Through the chair, I would move for approval of tonight's agenda.
I second it.
The agenda has been a motion to approve by Mr. Willis and approved by Ms. Berluti. Jeff, are there any announcements or communications?
Nope, we have none at this time.
Okay. We will start the meeting with a public hearing for item PZRODD22-0001.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first item on your agenda this evening is a public hearing. It is a rezoning request to amend an existing overlay development district development agreement of Mr. Hassan Jawad, representing Middle Point Investment Group. It is for 8.818 acres of land for the construction of a mixed-use development with retail, office, and multiple family units on property located 26111 Evergreen Road. You can see, based on at least the first slide, the amendment to the current ODD, the petitioner has provided the following amendments. Maximum number of parking spaces, if a parking structure was constructed, was 800. They're proposing now 1,500. All constructed buildings with permitted uses will have a minimum of 1,000 square feet to a maximum of 500,000 square feet. Originally, it was 150,000. Minimum apartment size of 325 square feet for micro units. Originally, it was 500 square feet. Building height of 6 to 8 stories, 100 to 150 total height. Originally, it was a 6-story maximum. And then finally, architectural design and building elements, single and multiple story flat roofed buildings clad in brick, stone, and metal panels, featuring large expanses of glass details, including towers, protected canopies, and accent columns, as referenced in the development plan. They would like the option to use fiber cement panels and lightweight rain screens as part of the architectural design. And again, this is for construction of a mixed-use development with retail, office, and multiple family units. So again, this is an amendment to a current overlay development district, and then I highlighted the items within the new overlay development that they are looking to change. This is the property in question. It is actually directly right across the street from City Hall here. It's RC. We have an ODD as the overlay. And this is the previously approved overlay development district plan. It did have retail across the frontage of Evergreen Road, as well as a single standalone restaurant use with a drive-through. The balance of the property, at least in the middle, was a mixture of office use. And then on the west side of the property was multiple family. So again, this is what originally was approved in the overlay development district under PZR ODD 21-0002. This is now the new proposal, significantly different than the first one. The standalone restaurant with the drive-through remains. However, the balance of the property has changed significantly with regard to density. And what was just a single-story retail right on the corner of Evergreen Road and Civic Center Drive now is a multiple-story, multiple-family, along with retail on the first floor. So this is the site plan. Elevations of the standalone restaurant with the drive-through. And then we get into each one of the building proposals. This is what Building B would look like. This would be the building on the corner of Civic Center Drive and Evergreen. Building C North, so this would be at the northwest corner of the building. Those are the elevations. And then finally, Building C South is the building on the corner of Civic Center Drive and Central Park Boulevard. And with that, I do know that Mr. Hassan Jawad is here this evening. He is the petitioner. And I would ask Mr. Jawad to come forward to explain this proposal to the Planning Commission once again. And again, if there's anything that we missed with regard to the changes that you were looking for, now is your opportunity to reflect on those.
Good evening, Hassan Jawad, Middle Point Investment Group. As Jeff has stated, the few key points relative to the ODD has been the increase of 6 to 8 stories, reflective of the overall height. Also, the increase of the gross square footage to 500,000 square feet per building to reflect the new site plan and the density. And then also, we had the reduction in size of the minimum apartment unit from 500 square feet to 325 square feet, and then an increase of to 1,500 for overall parking structure spaces, because each of our buildings have integrated parking structures. I'm here to answer any questions you may have regarding the plan.
This is a public hearing. Are there any individuals here that'd like to speak on the plan on this item? Seeing none, we will go close the public hearing. The commissioners, Mr. Huntington?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Okay, with the current economic times and the situation with the office space here in Southfield, we have abundance of Southfield office space available. Have you put any thought into possibly changing or reducing the amount of offices you have scheduled to build?
Yes, so there's one component on this plan, I believe, up in Building B, which is up front. There's a designation of office, but it's first floor commercial space, whether it ends up being retail or office. We do have a prospective office tenant who is looking to be in this location, and that's one of the reasons why we designated that particular space as office. But I'd like to call it first floor commercial flex space, whether it ends up being retail, whether it ends up being office and or services and such.
Okay, that's good. So give you a little flexibility.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffiths?
I think this is an exciting plan. It's probably more appropriately scaled for the corner of Evergreen and Civic Center in the city center district. So it's good to see the size of the buildings increase as construction costs have gone up, and obviously values come along with it, inflation, all the scary stuff that's happening right now. So I hope you build this. I hope you start building it soon. I hope it's exciting and people are rushing to get in. I think it's the right development for this site. We've seen a lot of master plan renderings similar to this scale. It's been a long process, but it's good to see the development increasing in size instead of shrinking down. So I hope you can build it all.
Thank you.
And more.
Mr. Willis?
Thank you. I need to join my colleagues. I think it's an excellent proposal, but just one question. You're going to have roof space. I'm wondering if you've considered any of the roof space for outdoor gatherings swimming pool if possible, small areas, kind of sporting event, kind of things like that?
I didn't hear I heard a word and then I heard space and I didn't.
Okay, the rooftops are relatively flat, and I'm wondering if you had considered them for gathering spaces, parties, for example, garden spaces, anything of that nature.
So each of the buildings actually has a courtyard or an amenity deck in the center of each building. They're intended specifically for the tenants and residents that are living in those buildings. We do have some discussions regarding the utilization of the rooftop space as well, and that is something that we have on our radar. Whether or not it's going to ultimately happen or not is still yet to be determined. But because we had private space, entertainment and amenity space for the residents within the buildings, we wanted to ensure that we also had something for everybody else who was visiting the site, hence the park that we put in place at the center of the site as well. So I think providing something that is private as an amenity for the tenants will serve well, and then providing something for the public. But point well taken in regards to the rooftops. We do have a lot of rooftop space, and if we can find a demand and desire for it to be there that ultimately makes economic sense, then it's definitely something we'll look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm excited by this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Kuhnbach,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Cooley,
Pardon me, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the changes that you made. They're very, very positive. I had one question I'd like to ask about the Pocket Park. Would you elaborate a little on that and let us know what that's going to be exactly?
It is a public, open space that will have seating and hopefully allow us a space to do programming for both residents as well as the public. I live in Plymouth, and we've got Kellogg Park in downtown Plymouth, and there's people doing yoga in the morning in the park, which is nice. Sometimes you may have a band there. The one thing that I do, and here's kind of my overall vision, is the park is costly to put in place and to maintain, and it doesn't pay rent. But what it does do, and what I see again, I go back to Kellogg Park because it was my model for this particular design, is if you go to Kellogg Park during Halloween, you will find scarecrows or jack-o'-lanterns in the park. If you go during Christmas, you will find Christmas trees. If you go in the winter, there's an ice sculpture festival. And even though it is not a restaurant or providing a service, it is an attraction mechanism to bring people to Southfield and to the area. It's also a retention mechanism to know that you can walk out of your apartment and go downstairs to a park. And so that's kind of the idea in regards to my thoughts on how it would be utilized.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Huntington, further question?
Yeah, one more question. Is there any green initiatives in this project at all?
We're still sorting through that. Some of the things that have been looked at is the possibility of green roofs, but we're still sorting through that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Griffin? Mr. Willis?
Nothing further.
Nothing at this time. Nothing further.
Unfortunately, I have a few questions. Do you have an estimated start time? After going through the city, the process with the city?
Yeah, we're hoping to start at least moving dirt this year, at least starting with the site work. The project, realistically, with our schedule from what we have projected right now, from beginning to end, has an end target date that hits 2025. It's pretty extensive project in regards to its scale and in size. But we're hoping to start moving dirt this year. There's a couple other moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts, I should say. But the hope is to start moving dirt this year.
I assume that you're going to start with one building and then the next one?
Due to the sheer scale of the buildings, and because we can only do one building at a time. The idea will be, because all three buildings are very similar in their design and their footprint, is to start with Building B, which is the building on the corner of Evergreen and Civic Center. It's also the building that, let's say, has the most demand because it's on the hard corner of Evergreen and Civic Center, at least for the first floor tenants. But we want to work through our kinks and our construction lessons in Building B and take what we've learned and incorporate that into the additional two buildings at the rear of the site.
I know it's a little early in the process. Do you anticipate employees in each building? Employees for each building?
Yes,
Management on site?
yes,
What about pets? Do you,
yes.
okay, all right.
It's actually one of the amenities that we're looking to include is pet spa as one of the amenities in our buildings.
Do any further questions? Okay.
Perhaps, just one, I'm sorry. Commissioner Huntington asked about green initiatives, and you've stated where you're considering green initiatives, and that is one that we would look at. I guess we consider it built into the entire packet. Are you beginning to think about green initiatives? Do you have any idea what kinds of things are going to go in there, or just where are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that that we've had conversations about, and as I had mentioned previously, one of the things that we've talked about is kind of in line with your question about utilizing the rooftops. We have had some discussion about the possibility of green roofs, but it ultimately has to make economic sense as well. But generally speaking, across the board in regards to things going from energy efficient windows to the heating and cooling units, the package units that are going inside the apartments, the lighting and being LED and so forth. I mean, those are all things that are going to happen regardless, but any of the over-the-top items such as I mentioned, green roof and so forth, are still things that we're in discussion about.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair. Question. How about as far as charging stations? Is that part of the plan?
Yes, absolutely. All decks are going to be equipped with charging stations. It's inevitable. It's just the trend in the way things are going, so yes.
Do any further questions?
Thank you. No.
Mr. Spence?
Yeah, if the commission is ready for a recommendation, the planning department does recommend favorable, let me move to it, recommends favorable consideration of PZR ODD 22-0001 to amend the current Middle Point ODD Master Development Plan and Agreement for 8.18 acre parcel with underlying RC Regional Center and to allow for the development of a mixed-use development of retail, office, multiple family units, and other site amenities with the following reasons. Amendments include maximum spaces of parking structure constructed, 1,500 spaces. All constructed buildings within the permitted uses will have a minimum of 1,000 square feet to a maximum of 500,000 square feet. Minimum apartment size of 325 square feet for micro units. Building height of 6 to 8 stories, 100 to 150 total height. Architectural design and building elements, single and multiple story flat-roofed buildings clad in brick, stone, and metal panels, featuring large expanses of glass details, including towers, protected canopies, and accent columns, as referenced in the MDP. Option to use fiber cement panels and lightweight rain screens. This proposal will be consistent with the surrounding zoning classifications and is in accordance with the Southfield Comprehensive Master Plan that indicates city center subarea for this parcel. Proposal utilizing the ODD, Overlay Development District provisions with underlying RC Regional Center, will allow the petitioner to market the properties for redevelopment of mixed-use land use compatible with abutting existing developments, and will allow for development flexibility in accordance with the amended ODD development agreement. Proposed rezoning will not have adverse effects on any of the adjoining zonings or land uses. Petitioner is to work with the planning department and the city attorney to finalize the overlay development agreement, including streetscape and furnishing details that will be subject to approval by the city planner. If development is to happen in phases, petitioner is to seek approval of phase 1 site plan, as well as each subsequent phase from the Planning Commission and the City Council. Thank you.
Do I have,
Through the chair,
yes,
I'd like to make a motion for favorable consideration for PZR ODD 22-0001.
Support.
it has been motioned for favorable approval and seconded by Mr. Willis. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for your time and support.
Good luck to you, sir.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Our next item is site plan PSP 21-0013.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your next item is site plan PSP 21-0013. Petitioner is Halo Architects, property located at 25333 West 12 Mile Road on the south side of 12 Mile between Lockdale and Case. Existing zoning is RC Regional Center, and the site plan review request is for the conversion of the previous Star Theater to a religious institution for Triumph Church. In accordance with Article 15, Section 5.139, Paragraph 2B, a religious institution is a secondary primary use along with theaters, assembly halls, concert halls, and similar places of assembly. And therefore, again, it is a permitted use on the property. This is the site aerial of the property. The Star Theater is shown in red. Proposed elevations, you can see the top is the existing Star along with the proposed elevations at the bottom of the slide. As I noted, current zoning is RC with regional mixed use as a future land use. This is the site plan for the site. It does include some amenities, some changes with pedestrian connections and barrier-free as well. Landscape plan for the property. Elevations, as I had shown you earlier in a rendering. And this is the floor plan of the property. If you recall, as we've gone through this process over the last couple of months, we did ask the petitioner to color code the various uses within the building. So those are the color codes that you see. The large space in the kind of the light green is the major gathering portion on the site. You also have administrative offices. You have various smaller chapels, areas for children as well as youth. The front portion of the building includes administrative offices, so this would be on the north side, as well as potential for a community, I believe it's like retail and potential food sales as well. Parking. So we have the petitioner has provided parking layouts based on all of the various uses within the building. So this one indicates the parking for the weekday. Parking for weekday, let me go to my slide here, which is easier for me to read than what's up there. I apologize for that. So for weekday parking, and we are looking from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. This is Monday through Thursday. The requirement is 257 spaces with 562 available. Weekday parking after 5 p.m. They are looking to use the property on Tuesdays for Bible study. Total number of parking between the various uses there on a Tuesday evening, along with the Compassion Center, is 578 spaces. And then on Thursday evenings, they also have a choir rehearsal, which requires 378 spaces. On the weekend, parking requirements are a total of 1,095 spaces required for the entire site, and they have 1,136 spaces available, so they would meet their parking requirements. With that, we do have the petitioner here this evening, and I would ask them to come forward and explain their project again in detail for the public who's here this evening.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Stan Robertson, I'm with Halo Architects, and I'm here representing Triumph Church. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. So once again, we're excited to be presenting this project to you. We think that there is a great opportunity here with the existing building for an actual church use, both the facility itself as well as parking. I want to start out the presentation just making sure everybody on the commission knows and understands that we understand we've got to be a good neighbor. We want to make sure that everybody knows that we will continue to reach out to our neighbor, make sure that we are talking to them about what we're doing on the site, and really just making sure that we have a good relationship with everybody involved. The church, of course, is here to serve not only the congregation but also the community. We wouldn't ever think of doing anything outside of that to begin with, and so I just wanted to make sure that we noted that. We have had, we started having meetings with the neighbor on January 4th of this year. There have been numerous meetings since then, including our broker, who had mentioned that he has talked to Mr. Friedman 5 times since January 4th. And so pointing that out just to let you know that we are going to continue that effort and work towards a favorable outcome when it comes to that. Parking-wise, we have gone over the numbers associated with how we're parking the site. When it came to the weekday after hours, so after 5 o'clock, since we had to load the building on a weekend as if everybody was in a seat in that entire facility, the entire 178,000 square feet of it, that isn't being done on weekdays between, well, after 5 o'clock. And so if we can park it on Sundays and Saturdays, then the weekday after hours basically falls into that same category. The building's not being fully utilized at that time. Some of the high points that I want to mention on the building, we think, as I've mentioned, the site is a great site for an actual church of this size to be located. There's a lot of benefits with the site, the way it is currently designed and how we're going to facilitate it. The benefits of the building itself and the design, wanted to point those out again, and the fact that we are going back in with complete new mechanical systems in this building that will be energy efficient. All of the lighting package in the building will be changed to LED lighting. Once again, something that's going to draw way less power than what you have currently. I think in a prior meeting, we had mentioned how much less power this building will actually draw. Just the actual demo of something like this, if a municipality was going to demo the building itself, if you compare that to adaptive reuse of a building, it's a significant load on waste and the actual landfill and other things like this. So once again, being a steward of what is available to us and trying to design something to be able to reutilize that building, use it for another capacity, and be successful in doing so. We hope that you like, what we have produced when it comes to the design. As I mentioned at the beginning, we really want to serve this community, and I want to go ahead and open this up and answer any questions that you might have.
To the commissioners, Mr. Huntington?
I like the idea of adaptable use. It is a nice building, and I would hate to see it get tore down. Actually, I hate to see the show leave, but I think the site does work for the church. I do have a question. How do you control the crowd when you have special events? How do you control who's coming, how many people are coming?
Very similar to what you would typically see with a large church. Are you talking about a large event during weekdays?
Yeah, the special events, do you have tickets they have to have, or do you just come, first serve? How does that work?
Well, I understand. Let's get to the basis of the question. The church, any events that require a lot of crowd control, the church has mechanisms to control that. One way is tickets, of course. Okay. Another way is phasing of events at the facility, and that's why I was in an earlier presentation. I was saying the church actually has a lot of ways to control even the demand of parking on this site, anywhere from Sundays to some uses during the week. Traffic can also be controlled and maintained using volunteers and other mechanisms that you probably have seen being used in other parts of the city with other large venues that have that kind of parking. But tickets is a good example of how you could control that. And churches that we typically work for, they use a lot of different mechanisms in how to actually control that crowd.
Okay. Most churches don't use tickets. That's why I'm wondering if you have a special event, a special singer or something coming in. So you're saying each family get so many tickets, or how does that work? How would that work?
Well, I wouldn't know how they, I'm just here to tell you that they would have mechanisms to make that happen. I wasn't talking about church services, I was talking about special events. And so with tickets, sales, and other things like that, or distribution of tickets, they're able to control how many people are actually going to be coming into those doors.
Well, even church events. Sometimes you have special guests in there, maybe Easter Sunday. Is there some way to control how many people are coming?
Invitation, there would be, again, I mean, it could be something that is, you're issuing a certain number of invitations. You have RSVP systems. These days you have digital mechanisms on people signing up and having a good registry of who is coming. And again, this is for special events and things like that that the church is hosting.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, through the chair, during this process at our study meetings, we have actually allowed the public to speak on this particular item, and it might be prudent to at least give them the opportunity before any further deliberation by the planning commissioners. So again, it is at your discretion, but it is something that we have allowed at least pretty much at every single study meeting we've gone through on this item.
As I called Mr. Huntington's name, I remembered I really do need to have a public hearing on this. And
yeah, if I may, it's not a public hearing. There's no public hearing required for site plans, but you can allow the public to speak at your discretion.
Is Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak on this proposal?
Yeah, and if I may, you would have 3 minutes. We would ask that you state your name and your address for the record.
Good evening. Scott Shuffman from the Galleria Office Center, the office complex that's next door to the Star Theater complex. I believe this is the fourth time that I've been before you on this matter, and the issue that I would like to raise is the same that I've raised on my previous 3 appearances. That is that the petitioner's site plan, as far as we can tell, is not compliant for parking purposes in relation to the code. Petitioner's site plan indicates that they need, I think it was 1,054 parking spaces to meet code requirements. Petitioner is trying to bifurcate the weekend from the weekdays. So far as I know, there is nothing in the code that permits them to say that they are, that they don't need to comply with the code for parking purposes 24/7. So I will remind the commission that there is an agreement between Galleria Office Center and Star Theater that essentially gives the Galleria Office Center ownership of 500 parking spaces on the Star Theater site Monday through Friday during normal business hours. So when you subtract out the parking spaces that Galleria Office Center owns during the weekdays, the Star Theater property is not left with a sufficient number of spaces to make this use, the proposed use, compliant for parking purposes. And I would also like to point out to the commission that the commission suggested roughly a month ago, when this issue was first raised, that petitioner reach out to us at Galleria Office Center to talk about this parking issue, and we have not heard from petitioner since that time until about 5 minutes before this meeting, when a representative of the petitioner sent an email to David Friedman asking to get together. So I will leave you with that. It is our feeling that this site is not compliant for parking purposes under the code. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. May it please the members of the Planning Commission, Timothy Stopker.
Could you step closer to the mic,
Yep.
please?
Timothy Stopker, appearing on behalf of the property owner, EPR Properties. I'm intimately familiar with this property, having worked on the Star Theater back in mid-90s when this was built, and also the properties surrounding that. I want to make sure the record is clear on this. Friedman does not own any of the parking spaces. There is a non-exclusive easement for parking, which has existed since both the theater development was approved along with that office space, which the city was aware of. So they don't own those spaces, and it's non-exclusive parking during their use of that. In addition to that, the parties contemplated when the theaters were built that the change of use could happen. So there was a formula reached that's not from a zoning perspective, but even privately, to discount 177 spaces from the non-exclusive area. And with that deduction, we still far exceed what it is that we need to park for this church on this property, even if it was used full all the time. With also the understanding that the number of seats from a traffic control standpoint are far less than the theater seats that existed when the theater was developed, okay? And all the ingress, egress lanes that were designed for a far greater use of people for the theater use remain intact as required. And so free use of the property, ingress, egress throughout and in between the property, both for the adjacent office use and for the church use, will remain fully intact. So this was contemplated when the theaters were built, that at some point theaters might not exist. So the parties internally, unrelated to zoning, agreed to a method in which to accomplish that. But to make sure that the record's clear, Friedman does not own these spaces. At best, they have a non-exclusive easement to use them. And we are not counting any spaces on their property, which the theater did to meet its requirements, towards our parking count, which the ordinance, by the way, allows us to do. But we're not doing that. We're not counting those spaces. We're looking only at ours. And so under the formulas, under their formula, which is separate from zoning, and under the city's formulas, we meet all the parking requirements 24/7. Thank you.
The actual documentation that he was
Excuse me,
referring to.
Stan?
Yes.
Stan? We want to make sure all the public has a chance to speak before we bring you back up here.
Sorry.
And it's the chair, when the chair will call you, when.
Any more comments from the public? Okay. We will go back to your comments, please. Here, clarify any of the points that were just made.
I was just going to mention that the material that he was referencing, we have sent to the city attorney with that parking agreement between the two parties.
To the chair, I'm sorry, to Ms. Bermudi, did you have any questions?
No, none.
Mr. Goodwin, aye?
No.
Mr. Willis?
I do. I have to assume that there is a piece of paper that defines use rights of the parking spaces between what will soon be the theater and Galleria. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Both parties are in possession of the same piece of paper,
That is correct.
and both parties interpret that piece of paper different?
That is what it appears, yes, sir.
And I think you said you presented to city attorney to resolve that issue?
That is correct.
Have you heard from city attorney with regard to resolution? See which way it should go?
All I have heard is that the city attorney has reviewed it. We have, I have not
I
heard
can
personally.
speak to that issue when you're all done.
Okay, I am looking for that answer.
Okay.
Could you, is there a specific area for parking that is in question? Or is it any portion of the parking area?
On the image that you have on the screen right now, the area that is in gray are the parking spaces on the AMC Theater property that is in question between the two parties. The thick dashed dot line that goes around the entire property is also the actual property line of the AMC Theater. So any gray inside of that property line is what's in question here.
If you could clarify through the chair, it's not so much what's in question, that's what the easement says during the week.
That is correct.
Is
The parking easement.
exclusive to the office.
They're
Non-exclusive,
wrong
but-
terminology.
Okay,
It's not exclusive to the office.
But it's whatever term you want to use, they have access to those parking spaces Monday through Friday, typically from 8 to 5 p.m.
They can use those parking spaces between 8 and 5, but it is not exclusive to them.
Right. So that's why it's grayed out, and within the boundaries, again, those additional spaces that are identified with the darker gray are, can be used by the office complex, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Outside of 5 o'clock during the weekdays and on the weekends, the church would be able to use the remainder of the parking spaces for a total of 1,000-something spaces.
Based on what we understand with the parking agreement, the church can use those spaces anytime they want. They just have shared access to those with the neighbor from 8 to 5 on Mondays through Fridays.
So you're saying a first come, first serve?
That is correct. First
Okay.
come, first serve.
Okay, all of that may be some semantics. This is what I will say. The religious institution is a secondary use. The Star Theater was determined to be a secondary use and was approved at 6,000 plus or minus a few seats. When we add up the total of the seat count for the church, it's somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 seats. So it's less than what was originally approved. There are no special additional parking requirements for secondary use because they're supposed to be in a supportive role to the primary use. So if you think of a 20-story office building that may have a florist and a barber shop on the first floor, Those are considered secondary uses to the primary use of office. They don't require additional parking. But because this was originally approved as a secondary use with the consideration of a reciprocal parking in some of these easements, we followed the same course of logic when we were doing our review in this particular case. I spoke with the city attorney this morning, and we're comfortable that they meet the zoning. And you can make a recommendation based on that. The use is permitted, and we feel based on what they provided us with their floor plans and their usage plans, even looking at the private easement agreements, and I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but based on the weekday uses and the weekend uses, that this meets our zoning requirements. Now, just like anything, if someone tells us they're going to have retail and they put a restaurant in and they exceed the parking, then there's a problem. And then we go into enforcement. But based on the information, the detailed information they've given us on their usage, how the building's going to be laid out, and the hours of operation, and the fact that this was previously determined as a secondary use with the same parking calculations, and this is less intensive than what was originally approved by the Star Theater, which, if you use the logic that they had to meet the same parking requirements 24/7, 7 days a week, then there would be no way that they could have 6,000 seats there. So we're comfortable that this use is permitted and that they meet the zoning requirements. The attorney will continue to view and vet this prior to going to city council, but as far as we're concerned, this proposal meets our zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Griffith?
This site has always looked like the perfect site for a very large assembly building, like a theater or a church. I mean, it's got a lot of entrances and exits. It's on a major road. It's very large. There's a big office building next to it that needs all the same things. And they seem to be not competing uses. They're not trying for 24 hours a day, 100% occupancy at the same time. So it seemed like a perfect reuse of this building, a similar use in stepping down in intensity slightly, keeps the same differing hours. It's always made sense to me. There's been a lot of math done, and if the planning department's comfortable and the city attorney, I think it makes sense. I think when will be the day where every parking space is full and people are fighting over parking spaces? I don't see that happening anytime soon, but I don't think it will. It's so large. It's so it's so spread out. Like, it seems like everything can exist at the same time. So, I mean, the other alternative is say no to this building, then now we have a parking problem. We have this huge parking lot just sitting there empty all the time, the opposite direction. That's a weird thing. I don't think when you build churches of this size, they're generally, from what I've seen, out in a cornfield or in the suburbs or past the suburbs. Or this is kind of rare to find an opportunity for this big of a building in a developed city where one use was obsolete and another use just so happened to need that much space. I mean, it's a perfect marriage, really, of the adaptive reuse of the site. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good development. This has been a new level of talking about parking than we've ever had here, which is exhausting, but it's justified, obviously. But we've seen a lot of redevelopment in the looking at a previously antiquated or excessive parking code with our zoning ordinance and trying to get it right sized. And I think we have enough precedence of you can reuse buildings differently and still have enough parking at the end of the day. So I think it's a good project.
Mr. Huntington?
I think this site is a good site for the church. There's going to be some times where it's going to be awfully crowded and compacted, but I think it will work. I did have a question. Do you have funerals during the week?
There will be funerals during the week, yes, sir.
Okay. So, but you never anticipate running out of parking because of a large funeral?
Most funerals with our churches would not be taxing the amount of parking that's available to them, whether weekday or on the weekend.
Okay. But overall, I think it's a good site for the church. Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Pardon me, I am in full support of Triumph going ahead with this, this vision, and all of the things that I've seen that you intend to do with this property, it can do nothing but improve the whole community. So I am in full support of it. Thank you.
Ms. Goodwin-Dye?
I'm in agreement. I think it'll fit really well there. My only question, and this is just a personal question, how many people are parking in the Galleria portion from 8 to 5? I've driven past there and I haven't seen it, you know, totally and completely full from 8 to 5.
We've had similar observations, but I can't answer that specifically.
Okay.
Mr. Willis?
Thank you. I'm comfortable with the count. If we're going to have a count that fits theater, similar loose with the church, then I am comfortable with the measurement of those numbers. So, you know, our job is to make sure the T's are crossed, and this looks like one of those T's that has been crossed. Thank you.
I have a question for clarification from the gentleman from Galleria. How often do you use a major portion of the parking spaces that are in question?
When these buildings were full, very frequently. As you may or may not know, the two front buildings, the buildings that front on Northwestern Highway, 100 and 200 Galleria, are not currently full. Those were the buildings that Volkswagen was planned to occupy prior to COVID. Had they gone forward, this site would be parked to the max. As we speak now, we are engaged in conversations with another large tenant of similar size to occupy those two front buildings. If that were to happen, this site would be occupied to the max, and we would be parking to our full allotment on the theater site. So just because there are not cars there today doesn't mean there aren't going to be cars there tomorrow.
And I assume that you anticipate the same hours of usage from 9
Yeah,
to 5,
during normal
basically?
business hours of, yes.
And that includes consideration for things like the equipment being used, the area being used by DTE for their trimming trucks?
From time to time, they may have trucks there when they're doing work at the site. I don't think that they're there all that often.
They've been there on a daily basis for the last 3 months, just as a point of information.
They may be staging there for some of their work elsewhere. I don't believe that they're doing a whole lot of work on our site presently.
Well, not necessarily your site, I'm just saying the parking, because the trucks are using the facility for parking.
Yeah, I think they've been staging some work at other sites from our location, but yes.
Okay.
But once those buildings are filled back up, yes, this site will be back at maximum capacity for parking purposes.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a recommendation from the planner?
Yeah, if the commission is ready, the planning department does recommend favorable consideration of PSP 21-0013, the site plan review request of Halo Architects, for allow the conversion of the existing Star Theater to a religious institution for Triumph Church. Property located at 25333 West 12 Mile Road, suitable parcel 2417-126050, south side of West 12 Mile Road between Lockdale and Case, Section 17, for the following reasons and conditions. A religious institution is a primary secondary use and is allowed per zoning ordinance per Article 15, Section 5.139, Paragraph 2B. Landscaping is to be installed in accordance with the approved landscape plan, sheets LS1 through LS6 dated 3/25/22 by FPA Associates. Any exterior lighting will be shielded to prevent spillage of glare onto adjacent properties. Tree protection fencing is to be installed per the approved landscape plan, sheets LS1 through LS6 dated 3/25/22 by FPA and Associates. Fencing is to be inspected by the planning department prior to lease of any building permit for proposed work. All elements of the site plan are to be installed in accordance with the approved site plan. Proposed bike racks shall be securely anchored to the supporting surface and shall be at least 3 feet high and able to support a locked bike in an upright position. Petitioners provide a sprinkler system for all landscape areas to encourage preservation of plant material. Petitioners to execute a perpetual maintenance agreement for the landscaped areas and parking areas both on site and in the right-of-way, which includes maintenance of the stormwater detention system. Petitioners to implement the recommendations made by Southfield Police Department's Crime Prevention Bureau regarding site security. Approval of this site plan and/or building elevations represented herein does not constitute nor guarantee approval for signage. Separate approval and sign permits must be obtained from the building department for any proposed sign. The site shall be designed and developed to contain public works of art in accordance with Section 5.22-5, Public Art, Article 4, General Requirements of the Zoning Ordinance. And the building is to be constructed in accordance with submitted elevations shown on sheet A200, dated 3/23/22 by Halo Architects. Thank you.
Do you have a recommendation?
Through the chair, move for favorable recommendation to PSP 21-0013.
I second that
All
motion.
in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Ms. Baruti seconded.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our next item is PSP 22-0003.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your next item is a site plan review request of Maple Tree Apartments, LLC, located 28545 Franklin Road, suitable parcel 24182777059. And we are on the west side of Franklin Road between I-696 and Matrot. The zoning for this particular portion of the property is RT, attached single family, and the future land use is moderate density single family. The site plan request before you this evening is for the construction of a 4-unit townhome building. So this is the zoning and the future land use for the property. You can see the circle in red on the right-hand side of the image. That is the proposed location for the 4-unit building. It is located within the RT zoning district. There's an image on the left of the entire complex, and the area in yellow is an indication of the area of proposal. The right side of the image is a little closer look. There is an existing structure on this building right now that actually is serving as some apartments. And again, the proposal would be to remove this particular building and build a new 2-story, 4-unit building that is similar to the current buildings going up along Franklin Road. This is the existing condition of the site, and this is the proposed site plan. So again, it would provide the parking requirements for these units. They also are proposing a new carport and then some new landscaping on the site as well. It does meet all the requirements for setback and for height. Setback in the area is 30 feet, and it does meet it on both sides. Proposed floor plan, again, it is a 2-story. They are stacked units. So you have the living kitchen area on the first floor, with the second floor being bedrooms. And these are the proposed elevations and rendering. And with that, I do know that we have Mr. Roger Scher here this evening, who's representing the petitioner. And Mr. Scher, now is your opportunity to come forward to explain your project.
Good evening. Roger Scher, representing MT Apartments LLC, 31300 Orchard Lake Road, Farmington Hills, Michigan. We're seeking site plan approval for the 4-unit building to replace the older home on the property. The units we're building, townhome units, upscale features, open floor plans, granite countertops in the kitchen, quartz countertops in the bathrooms, hardwood flooring, in-unit washers and dryers, very upscale, very nice looking. The exteriors of the buildings, vinyl and brick, all maintenance-free. There's no wood at all. Never will be painting will never be required on these buildings. The roofs over the porches, you can see, are metal seam roofs. They add a different element contrasted to the vinyl and the brick. Very nice looking. The color scheme is designed to coordinate perfectly with the existing maple tree community, so it will blend very nicely and not stand out as a sore thumb in the middle of an older community. In fact, in the existing community, we intend to modify the colors over time to reflect the new colors we're bringing in on these new units. The property, as it was mentioned, is zoned RT. We're well within the density allowable in this zoning category. Our parking, too, is in compliance. We have 13 parking spaces. For the 4 units, we're required to have 1.5 spaces per unit, which would be 6. So we're over, we're more than complying with parking requirements. The improvement here is consistent with the many upgrades we've been making to the property over time, both in the interior of the units, to the buildings, as well as to the site in general, replacing asphalt curbing with concrete curbing. These improvements are similar to, as Mr. Spence mentioned, to the improvement we made in the northeast corner of the site, where we're under construction. We now have 26 new townhome units. Be glad to answer any questions you have.
Before you ask any questions through the chair, Mr. Scher, did you bring photos of your current project as requested?
I do not have photos of the current project. The current project is under construction, where it soon will be more picturesque. In fact, as everyone knows, it's been difficult to labor conditions have been difficult. We just this week, after waiting, I'd say 45 days, we just this week started siding on the exterior, which really is going to provide a nice photo gallery for us that I can bring in.
And I don't see any sidewalks on Matrit. Is it Matrot Street? We require sidewalks on the perimeter of any new development and a connection to?
Matrot is the...
it's the street that's closest to the proposed development.
If we could bring up the site plan, the overall site plan for the planners.
Yeah, that's the only one I have.
The overall of the entire...
Oh, of the entire site?
Yeah, yeah, there we are. Matrot is the, on this slide to my left, would be, the property is fenced in. There's no pedestrian access or vehicular access to Matrot. Our only access is to Franklin on the north east side of the property, the boulevard entrance, where we do have sidewalk access. We don't have access to Matrot from any part of the site unless we take down the fencing.
Well, I was going to ask about the fencing too, because it needs to be upgraded. So you could punch a pedestrian access with a gate through there to get connected Matrot and put sidewalk only, for the portion that you're doing new construction for now.
We could very easily, there's no sidewalk along Matrot.
There's on the one side of the street there is.
The west side, correct. We could very easily break open the gate and create an access to Matrot, but, we're in a gated community. We market ourselves as a gated community. We have, for vehicular traffic, we have our gates come down at 9 o'clock at night and go up at 6 in the morning.
The pedestrian gate can be key fobbed. I've been in many gated communities that have a key fob to get in as a pedestrian. It's a requirement, so that's why I'm bringing it up. We have a requirement for any new development or major redevelopment that you have to have a sidewalk or a pathway on the street and a pedestrian connection too.
We look at our connection onto Franklin Road, where we do have sidewalk within the property connecting onto sidewalk along Franklin. We look at that as our pedestrian connection. This development, again, is an older community. There are interior sidewalks that take you from parking areas to the buildings themselves, but there isn't a circular sidewalk that gives every building access to Franklin. People use the streets for pedestrian, for walking.
And again, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, we understand that's the way things were done. We have different requirements today. So I think you either have to provide the sidewalk on Matriot with a connection, or you'll have to prove to us that a pedestrian can safely navigate from this back corner through your development to Franklin without walking in the street. So it sounds like you're not prepared to answer that tonight. That's something that we're going to request that gets provided.
Well, I am prepared.
I don't see how you get through your development to Franklin safely as a pedestrian.
You use our streets and you access.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You're requiring pedestrians to walk in the street where vehicles are.
Well, these are private streets. They aren't through streets, so we don't have through traffic. We don't have, because of the curvilinear nature of the streets, with drives connected in multiple areas, you just don't have the speed, the traffic. We've done developments in the past where we do have traffic signs, children crossing, deer crossing. We have traffic signs to reduce traffic below even a 25-mile, 20-mile speed limit. We've had 15-mile speed limit for that very concern. In this case, there's just a natural flow of there's the way again, the curvilinear nature of the streets and the access to drives and parking and carports, you just don't have traffic speeding within the community. In fact, apartments are about amenities. I think the earlier gentleman in his community mentioned a pet park possibly being installed. In this community, one of the things, and I don't know if this would be permit required, but one of the amenities we'd like to provide is signage for and lining off a 3-foot part of our existing road for pedestrian traffic, because people are walking today, and they use our street, they feel safe on our street, walking around. Now, what they would not feel safe with is if I start punching holes in gates that are leading to other communities for pedestrian access, fob, no fob, chain linked. They feel safe in our gated community. They feel safe on our roads. We have accident reports in the city of Southfield. Never have we had an accident report within the community involving a pedestrian. So I think on a practical level, I would ask the Planning Commission to observe our sidewalk connection, which is newly installed to Franklin Road, accept the history of this community as one that was approved, designed, and constructed without a sidewalk on the perimeter of the property, and recognize on a practical level that we've made multiple improvements. This building that we're now seeking site plan approval for, replacing an older building on the site, enhancing the tax base, and at the same time, doing so without endangering any of the current walking traffic we now have. Had we not built this, had we not proposed this new building, I suppose no one would have come to us with a violation that we don't have sidewalks taking you to Maytrot or to Franklin. We would have been fine. Now, it looks like we're being penalized for doing something good.
Excuse me, you're not being penalized, it's a requirement. You're proposing new construction. We have to make sure that the project meets today's zoning standards. And I'm going to ask the Planning Commission table action on this item until either he satisfies the sidewalk requirement or requests a waiver for the sidewalk requirement.
Can I request that waiver tonight?
You have to provide information regarding that.
Mr. Crote, I can't provide anything more than we have in front of us.
And that's why I don't think you're ready.
All this will do is delay me for
Well,
no reason whatsoever.
I brought these issues up at the discussion item. At our discussion, I asked about the sidewalk and I asked about photos.
And I've answered them in correspondence
Well,
between
then
their
it's
early-
up to the Planning Commission to decide. I'm recommending that this gets tabled.
I have nothing new to come back with. I don't know
believe
what I
at
can
the
say. I
last
can't
meeting-
change a site plan that's been constructed over 30 years ago. I can only propose making improvements that are within my best ability.
You are proposing new construction for 4 apartments, 4 townhouses, whatever you want to call it. You're reconfiguring the parking lot, putting a carport, you're putting a sidewalk in front of it. That triggers meeting today's standards for this portion. We're not requiring you to make these improvements in other areas that you're not improving, but this particular corner of your property, you're proposing new construction. We have to make sure it meets today's standards. And in my opinion, you don't meet those standards. So you either have to address meeting those standards, or you'll have to request a waiver.
Okay, once again, if possible, since I have no new information to present, I'd ask that the commission make an exception to whatever procedure would be required for a waiver and entertain a waiver tonight. One thing I'd like to mention is in the sidewalk connection we brought to the site for the 26 new units we constructed, we actually assembled new land. We purchased new land and added it to our site. So we did make a change to the site itself. Here we're not making any change to this. We're not buying any more land. We're just taking down an older building that's already there. And theoretically, we could have more inhabitants in the house, the single-family house that's there, than we could in the 4 new townhome units that were there. So it's sort of academic to say that 4 units are going to create a greater danger for pedestrians than the single-family home that's there now. So again, if I'm permitted, again, only because in my business, time is money, and construction schedules during our seasonal, the seasonal nature of construction in Michigan weather, I would like to hear, to propose a waiver be considered and voted upon tonight. And I'm not trying to be argumentative or not recognize the, what Mr. Crote is telling me here. I understand and often rarely disagree with the requirements that we face in zoning, in site planning, and in the various approvals we seek. I think sidewalks are wonderful. I would like nothing more than to wave a wand and have sidewalks appear, a circular walking route on this property. But we just don't have the room. It's never been a problem. Again, no accidents reported. So on a practical level, I'd like to request consideration of a waiver tonight if that's what's required.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you want a waiver, you would have to go through the board, the zoning board of appeals to get a waiver. One of the things that is available or can be seen in your presentation is that there are current sidewalks on the property that's going to be demolished. So sidewalks are indeed included in the area and need to be provided for the construction that's going to be done.
Through the chair, I mean, you certainly could, you could move forward with the conditions that a waiver be sought, and we would have to see about the timing of him applying for a waiver application, and we could hold it up going to council if he's not able to get his application in. I mean, you could make that an additional condition. My recommendation is to table it until we get this satisfied, but you do have the prerogative to move this forward with that as an additional waiver. I will just mention that every time we have new construction or renovation and people make the argument there's no sidewalks, we got to start somewhere, and it's been our goal to make all of our projects accessible and pedestrian friendly, and unless he can come back with a plan that shows that there's an accessible, safe route from this corner to the front, the shortest and easiest way is to punch 10 feet or whatever that distance is to Matriot Street, put his section of sidewalk, and then put across so that people had access to the east side of the street or the west side of the sidewalk. I think there can be an easy solution to this, but he has a right to seek a waiver. There's no guarantee that the ZBA would grant that waiver based on the fact of our precedent with other developments. I certainly wouldn't be in favor of making a recommendation towards that waiver. It is a requirement of our ordinance, as you know.
And it was also requested at our previous meeting. Can I get a motion? Mr. Griffiths?
I'm going to do a rare disagreement with our city planner here for a couple reasons. I'm super in favor of sidewalks and safe routes and pedestrian access. Just the sheer percentage, this is 4 units out of, you said several hundred, I don't know how many. I looked at this development last week or 3 weeks ago as the most private, most coveted unit in this whole development because there is no traffic, there's no people, there's no reason for anybody else to be there. So as you get further into this site, it gets safer and safer. There's less traffic because only the people that go to those units go back there. So from all those points of view, you obviously can't go back in time and rebuild all these buildings 5 feet smaller to fit sidewalks in front of them. If we're going to have a new 400 unit development today, it would have a lot more sidewalks, but I think the only people that are going to come, through the site, not out of the site, I guess going the other way. So this goes from being the most private to the least private unit, if there is a demand to walk through the site. But I think just by the sheer location and how small of a percentage this is, it seems out of place. The Franklin Road development was obvious because it was on the road and it was at the front of the development and it was achievable. This, I don't know, this thought never occurred to me until you said it today. So I think it's a nice idea, but it's a sidewalk to nowhere with a 95% developed site that really has no potential to put more sidewalks along the frontage. I don't get it. I think it'd be worth a vote on the zoning board of appeals if I was sitting on that, but I don't know.
Can I respond?
Further recommendation?
No, we're still discussing, aren't we? I think we're still in discussion, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
If you want to step out on my ledge.
Mr. Huntington?
Okay, yeah, I understand what the petitioner is saying, and due to the time and labor issues and what have you, it's pretty tough out there nowadays. I totally agree with what Jeremy is saying. This is a gated community, and generally you don't want a lot of openings where people can come in and out, and, you know, it's, that's something you generally don't want, is openings. To me, it doesn't appear that a sidewalk is even necessary there. I mean, if that's a requirement, it's a requirement, but I would seek a waiver. And I would be willing to move it forward and to see if a waiver can happen, but I'm kind of with Jeremy on this one.
Ms. Bermudi?
Well, unfortunately, I was sitting here thinking, when you sell your home that you've been in for 40 years, and when you get ready to sell it, when the inspectors come in, they make you change a lot of things that were okay. It was okay in the past, but you have to upgrade it and bring it up to code and all of that. So I think we need more discussion on this, and I think we really should, I think we should table it this time.
Ms. Goodwin-Dye?
I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners, Huntington and Griffiths, because this complex has been here for quite some time. And I live in, it's not a gated community, but we have a fence that goes around all three sides, and you have three entrances. You can only get in and out of those three entrances, and it makes us feel secure, okay? And I would hate for this gated community to lose that sense of security. And I understand we're trying to make Southfield a very walkable community, so that everyone can enjoy it. But I believe that you should go and ask for the waiver. And I would be in agreement with my fellow commissioners to move it forward, and for you to ask for a waiver.
And if
Mr.
I had
Willis?
to, thank you, if I had to add anything, it looks like the sidewalk is superficial, so I'm in accord with fellow commissioners. I'm not sure what else we would need to do to change that, so I see it as superficial, and if he needs to have a waiver from ZBA to do that. But I would approve.
Okay. I think the proper thing to do is to allow the petitioner to go to the zoning board of appeals to request the waiver and to table the discussion until the waiver.
Well, if I could, because I know timing is an issue.
Yep.
What I would recommend is you make the recommendation with the conditions as presented, and add an additional condition that the petitioner seeks a waiver for the sidewalk connection. That way it doesn't hold him up, to be fair to him.
Yep.
Because the ZBA wouldn't act until after the council. Any council approval would be conditioned upon the ZBA. It's not like you'd go to the ZBA and then come back to the planning commission. So if that's what the consensus of the planning commission is, you can move this forward with the additional condition that a waiver be sought for the sidewalk requirement.
Do I have a proposal?
Let me take a shot at that. I would move for approval of, I think we're PSP 22.
If I may, through the chair, before you continue, I do have a recommendation.
Okay,
If you want to move forward with that, then I can just add the new condition that has been suggested and has been basically debated here by the Planning Commission. And again, that waiver would read that a waiver of the sidewalk connection to Matrot, let's see. The petitioner shall seek a waiver of the sidewalk connection to Matrot from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Basically, that would be the condition if City Planner Crode agrees with that.
okay.
If I could, I think, Mr. Spence, we have to go further because there would be requirements for the sidewalk adjacent to. So I would just keep it open-ended, say waiver for the sidewalk requirements, and just leave it open-ended that way. That'll cover the connection and the piece on Matrot that is required.
That's part of the recommendation.
Yes, and then we'll continue to debate this as this thing moves forward, but at least it wouldn't hold him up.
Okay.
Okay, I think I have that additional connection, or that additional condition. So if you're ready for a recommendation, I can read that.
Please.
All right, the Planning Department recommends favorable recommendation of the site plan review request of Maple Tree Apartments LLC to construct 4 two-story townhome units in one building with associated parking and other site amenities. Property located at 28545 Franklin Road, 2418277-044 on the west side of Franklin Road between I-696 and Matrot for the following reasons and conditions. Landscaping shall be installed in accordance with sheets L1.0 and L1.1, and the tree preservation in accordance with sheet T1.0, plans dated 5/3/22 by PE Group. Exterior lighting shall be shielded to prevent spillage of glare onto adjacent properties. Petitioners provide sprinkler system for all landscape areas to encourage preservation of plant material. Petitioners will implement any recommendations made by the Southfield Police Department's Crime Prevention Bureau regarding site security. The building will be constructed in accordance with the elevations shown on sheet 004, 005, 006, and 009, dated March 8, 2022 by Albert B. Bogarts and Associates. Approval of the site plan and/or building elevations represented herein does not constitute nor guarantee approval for signage. Separate approval and sign permits must be obtained from the building department for any proposed use. And finally, the petitioner is to seek a waiver from the zoning, a waiver of the sidewalk connection. Let me start over. The petitioner is to seek a waiver of the sidewalk connection requirement from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
I could try. I move for favorable approval of PSP 22-0003 with the conditions highlighted in the reading of conditions by Jeff.
Support.
It's been motioned by Mr.
I'm Rob Willis.
Mr. Willis and seconded by Commissioner Huntington for approval with the waiver request. All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me 1 second before we take the vote.
Oh, no, I don't want to disturb the vote.
Okay,
I just
all right.
have a comment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
If I may, one thing I would like to know, I would like to find out what the zoning board of appeals does too. I would love to get that feedback.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just point out something by way of background, and Mr. Crode and Mr. Spence wouldn't know this either. The only incident, literally the only incident we've had at Maple Tree, and it was repeated a number of times, we had tires being taken from several of the cars and they would hoist them up and put them on blocks and steel tires. And they were coming from Matrot from the back. They cut a hole in our fence back there, and it was harmless crime. There's never any graffiti or anything, any real crime at Maple Tree, but they cut through the fence, and we then replaced that portion of the fence after once we realized it. There's a lot of trees back there, so we didn't know where anyone was coming through. But one of the nice things, you can't stop a crook, and our gated entrance does not stop an individual with bad intentions from walking to the site from Franklin. But we have everything cameraed, and those cameras are 24 hours, and it's incredible the kind of photography we have, the cinematography we have to maintain vigilance and security for our residents. And they feel that security. And I think opening up access to the back, and I respect what Mr. Crote has suggested with a fob entrance, but that too wouldn't be cameraed. And they do feel a sense of security with a perimeter fence on the property. Many of our residents have children, and I don't want to mention what happened the other day in a school, but it's security is if we could put up a 5-foot masonry wall, none of our residents would say, replace the masonry wall with a see-through fence. They would, if the 5-foot masonry wall were 10 feet, they'd say just fine. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is PSP 22-0004.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is your last site plan review request for this evening. This is PSP 22-0004. This is a site plan review request of John Abbo for 26760 Lasser Road, Sidwell parcel 2422-102-012. We're on the east side of Lasser Road between 696 and the M10 freeway. Property is Zone B3 General Business. This particular property has a medical marijuana provisioning center that was previously approved by council, has been constructed, and if you recall in the meeting that we had a few weeks ago, Planning Department brought forward some of the concerns that we had with regard to some of the things that were done on the site that weren't in accordance with the approved site plan nor with the approved elevations. Therefore, we thought it necessary to bring this back through the entire process for a new site plan, to amend some of those things that had been done on the property and actually give them a formal approval. I will say that since we met a couple of weeks ago, the petitioner has agreed to add the brick across the bottom. So where we did have the metal panels all the way down to grade, which was against city code, the petitioner has agreed to raise up that metal panel and actually do the brick as was originally shown on the site plan that was approved by council already. So there are a few items that they did make changes to on some of the elevations and a couple of site plan issues that I will show you here shortly. So that's what you will be reviewing and then ultimately making a recommendation on. So I'll move forward. This is an aerial of the property. Again, this is an old image. The property does not look like that now. The current zoning is B3 General Business. And then on the right-hand side, you do see the existing conditions with the constructed provisioning center. Changes to the site plan. So this is the new site plan that was submitted. The areas in red indicate the changes that were made. One of those being an additional 5-foot sidewalk along the east side of the building. So we're actually on the back side of the building. Lasser Road is to the left. It provided better access to the existing sidewalk along the north side of the building, and thus the reason why it was installed. Also, the revised canopy. The canopy ended up being it was a larger and a little bit taller prefab canopy, and you'll see the image of that in a moment. A little more decorative than the standard apartment complex carport that you would typically see. So from a site plan standpoint, these are the two items that you would be reviewing and making a recommendation on. And now moving to changes in the elevation. So the changes in the elevation, the previously approved elevations are on the left-hand side. The changes are on the right-hand side and then are circled in red. So you can see those. Just let me flip to my sheet as well here. So the top image is the north elevation. And on the north elevation, they actually added a new man door on the property that's circled in red. And then they brought the metal panels, the vertical metal panel around the corner. So we have some of that purple panel on the side of the building, the north side of the building, that was not there before. Next image down is the east elevation. The east elevation, the man door was actually moved from about the center of the building and moved closer to the front of the building, and that's the area circled in red there. The north side of the building, so this is the portion of the building that's facing Lasser Road. The changes that were made there included not only the carport, as you can see, the more ornate carport, but also included removing a window that was about at the northeast corner. It turns out that this particular location also included the manager's office, and there was a security concern that the petitioner had, and thus the reason for removing that window. You'll also see a small section in blue there. We actually had an administrative site plan review for elevations that was done earlier this year. So that portion of the building had already had an approval from the planning department for a change. The door, the side windows or the side lights originally were to the south of the door and now are actually centered on the door. So that was already approved by the planning department. So these are the changes that we're looking at, the site plan changes as well as these elevation changes. With that, the petitioner is here this evening, and I would ask them to step forward if they have any additional comments to make before the Planning Commission asks their questions.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Christopher Enright, 628 East Parent Street, Royal Oak, Michigan. I'm representing John Abbo on behalf of Loom this evening. We are architects. I'm an architect, and we do a lot of work with Loom. We didn't do the architecture of this particular building, but we've represented them in most of their projects across the state. Some 33 stores open across the state currently, with hopes for more in the future. I recall this building. I've been passing by it most of my adult life, 5 years ago, back and forth on my way to Lawrence Tech, going to school there for 6 years. And it's been a variety of iterations, and I've actually seen over the years the changes to the building. And I know the original intent was to use the existing brick on the building and then put the metal on that brick and then leave the base of the brick, with the understanding of the zoning ordinance that the base portion of that building have the resilient material that could withstand the snow, the ice, maintenance, things of that nature, which is a completely realistic and actually insightful requirement. During construction, it was determined either that the brick was not standing up on its own, it was insufficient as a backdrop, or in a number of cases around the perimeter of the building, the brick was actually sitting on sidewalk or flatwork material, not actually in foundation. So, rightly or wrongly, it was determined at that time to have to pull the brick off the building for a variety of reasons. Overall, it was not adequate for the substrate of the metal, and there should have been a better process for doing that instead of just an executive decision and moving forward. As Mr. Spence indicated, that Loom has committed to understanding that portion of the ordinance and a significant aspect of the reason for it. So that is no longer anything that was the original aspect of being here in the first place. The original petition was to get the brick waived. So that now will be cut back, the metal will be cut back, and then the modular brick will be put on the building and secured to the building with structural steel, et cetera, such that it is supported in an adequate measure and can withstand the test of time with that material. So they're going to commit, they are doing that, and they're going to start work as soon as possible in that particular aspect. And as I'm sure the board or the commission is aware that this particular business, there's a high level of sensitivity in every community that we're in for a variety of reasons. Normally there's an audience behind us who has some issue with one thing or the other, and so we're used to that sensitivity, and we also understand the scrutiny that's on this building. There should have been a little bit more oversight on that, and for that we apologize. So as such, there are a few items that we wanted to go over as indicated. And in this business, the business keeps changing and morphing, and we have to keep ahead of some of these things. And a couple months ago, we were making a presentation, and I still can say this, but back then, there were no known break-ins to any of the loom facilities, and still are to our knowledge. However, some of our competitors are now, we're starting to see some break-ins in some of these buildings where security is really now starting to become an issue. So in no particular order, in some of these issues, that was why that window was decided to be taken out. Again, not the proper procedure, but the reason for doing so was that in that space where that window was is the manager's office where the actual safe is for the building. And as I'm sure the commission understands that this is a thoroughly cash business, and so every transaction is cash, and so there's a high amount of cash that's in this building, and so the security reasons were the reason that window was removed and the siding was put in its place. We did have the originally planned that gray horizontal siding was wrapped around that corner, but instead we've proposed as shown the metal to create the consistency on the front as it wraps around the building. So that was sort of part and parcel of that same decision. Regarding the canopy, the original drawings, as you can see up there on that image on the left, in fact, when I first looked at the drawings and started to address some of these issues, I didn't even notice the canopy was there on the drawing. I couldn't find it because it wasn't colored. I didn't notice it at first. And that drawing that's shown there is really that's really the extent of the canopy detail that was indicated. But we're all very well aware of what apartment complex canopies look like, and one of the downsides of those systems is that they have columns at each of the parking spaces. So vehicles, when they come in on an angle or down that driveway, they're more prone to knocking those columns out or hitting them, and we've all seen them bent and damaged. The cantilevered carport alleviates that issue, and if anyone has been by the facility to see it, you can see how substantial those vertical columns are in the back of the parking spaces, such that vehicles will be able to traverse that back and forth without knocking the canopy over or damaging it. And it's a subjective issue or aesthetic issue, but we happen to think that that particular solution that's there is a substantial upgrade to what was proposed. And I think it adds actually a lot of aesthetic value to the end of the building in terms of raising that angle up on a building that's substantially orthogonal and flat. But that is probably the most visually substantial change to the proposal. And again, not being part of this project in the beginning, I was actually surprised that that was voluntarily changed, because that's a significant cost upgrade for that particular canopy. Regarding the back of the building on the east and the north elevations, also dovetailing into the landscape change, it was our understanding that at either one of the previous meetings that it was requested that not only these items that have been identified by staff and also in the walkthrough in January, but there was a request of us to determine any other changes that we felt were there that we knew about, and that's where the sidewalk and the landscape come into play. The original plan really didn't have a sidewalk access that I recall when I remember looking at the drawing that was adequate to the back of the building for deliveries and for access. So this change had provided access to the delivery doors in the back of the building. We still have the landscape screen to the east, and my understanding is the number of bushes that were proposed, so the amount of landscape material is still the same. It's just reapportioned in that island area. So that really just facilitated a better access to the back of the building. And also with those doors that are there, they're painted the exact same color as the brick, so they're sort of meld in with the back of the building. So visually, there's really not a significant change between where the doors were and where they are now. So in general, those are all the changes that are contrary to the approved plan. And with the addition of the brick that we're essentially removing from the original request, we are respectfully requesting the commission approve the remainder of the changes.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just rather have this come through one time and identify all the changes. I agree that the cantilevered carport is nicer, but the fact was there were a number of changes from what was approved.
Agreed.
And I noticed also with the door being relocated, my question is, and my direction would be, have a follow-up with the police department, because they had approved the original security plan, and now that the window's gone, that door's relocated. I don't know if there's any other changes to the floor plan, but I know the council will ask us, with all these changes, have you met again with the police department, get their sign-off? So that would be, I'm in favor of the recommended changes based on the fact that you're going to do the brick and that we've got them all detailed. But prior to going to council, if you receive a favorable recommendation, I would like to get some sign-off from the police department on these changes with your security plan.
Absolutely. Do you have a contact person?
Yes, we do.
Recommend?
You can contact Mr. Spencer,
We'll
myself,
go with Jeff
at the
on that.
office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will do.
If I may, through the chair to City Planner Crode, is that a condition that you'd like to add it to?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public that'd like to make comments on what's provided, what's been presented? Seeing no questions. Ms. Bermudi, are there any?
No, I don't.
Ms. Goodwin-Dye?
No.
Mr. Willis?
You stated that in the recent past, there has been robberies at other facilities, and I noted you changed the location of the window, you changed your door. You done anything electronically or any other kinds of things to ensure that you are also not victimized by robbery?
Could you ask the last time, are we a victim of robberies?
No, I'm saying, have you changed any other things to ensure that you're not victimized by robbery, since the robberies seem to be increasing?
Well, as I said, from when we started a couple of years ago looking at these projects have changed continually every iteration along the way. We learned something along the way, whether it's security, whether it's the way the market works. So we're responding to a variety of different aspects, including security. And one of the challenges that we do have in some communities is there is a specific zoning requirement for glazing glass in certain elevations on certain streets. And we run into real challenges with that, where we try, especially when it comes to a manager's office, to have those areas have no glass in them. So to answer your question, yes, we are responding to some of these other areas in a similar manner.
Any further?
But has there been something specific that you've done to this location to respond? Again, glazing the windows, the doors. anything like electronic, anything?
Mr. Willis, if I could, we understand the sensitivity of the security issues, and that's why we have the police department review it.
Okay.
So I wouldn't try to put the applicant on the spot to talk about his security measures in the public. That's why we have the police department vet it, and that's why I suggested that as an additional condition that they re-review any changes that they have to the site.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I appreciate you saying so, but I maybe misunderstood the question. Sometimes my hearing isn't all that great.
Okay, I'm good, though.
To answer the question, in terms of security, we have a very, very complex and sophisticated security systems in every one of these buildings. And the video systems are such, they're so sensitive that they get pictures of every aspect of this building, every square inch of the inside, and pretty much the perimeter of the outside of the building at all times. And it's keyed in directly to a central location. I don't know if it's directly to the police department.
Well, that's what you have to talk to the
Okay,
police
well,
department about.
when required and when possible, we always coordinate with the police department with the security systems. We will get with them and make sure that everything's coordinated.
Okay,
Thank you on that, yeah. Mr. Griffith?
I think the changes to the canopy and the elevations, I think it's a big improvement to the original design. I think it was smart to agree to put the brick on the bottom of the building to meet the ordinance. I know it's not an ordinance in every city, but I think the building's looking nice, and you know, as soon as you modify the completed exterior to meet the ordinance, and I think everything's been addressed here. Appreciate the decision to modify the elevations and come back and get the proper approvals.
Thank you.
Mr. Huntington?
Yeah, I'm also in agreement. I think the changes have been really, really good. It's a big difference from the first plans, and I think this building's much, much, much better.
Thank you.
I think you did a good job in the changes.
Thank you.
Any further questions from any other council members?
I would like to ask a question. You mentioned that everything is done on a cash basis.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have Brinks or someone to come by several times or that kind of thing to
Yep.
protect yourselves?
Yep, all the transporters, that's all done through licensed third-party
Good.
carriers, and absolutely, yes.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Goodwin-Dye?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Willis?
no further.
Okay. I have a few questions for you. First question is Mr. Crow, Director Crow. Is there a height requirement that the canopy has to meet? Because it seems like the building height and the canopy height initially were at a certain level, and with
Right.
the canopy at the angle, it's above that height.
Mr. Spence, I asked him to vet, to make sure they're within the requirements for height, and they are. Typically, we require 13 and a half feet of clearance if it was a portico for emergency vehicles such as EMS. But I don't know what the height is to the tip.
Yeah, if I may, the height of, or at the very point, the highest point of that canopy is 17 feet.
So
And is well within the range of the requirements for the B3 zoning.
Right.
Okay. Knowing that changes were made on the fly during construction different than what was originally planned, is that something that is normally done for facilities that,
Is that something, I'm sorry, sir?
is that something that is normally done for facilities that you build? I mean, this loom had specific requirements that had to be met as basically like a contract, and changes were made without any further clarification being, or correct, or authorization being obtained before they were done to the original plan. Is that something that's normally done?
Well, we do site plan approvals, special use approvals, BZA, city council meetings in 4 separate states, and at any given time, we're making a presentation once a week in some location. And we recognize the gravity, sensitivity, and importance of the commission, the councils, the boards approving plans publicly, such that this becomes, as you indicate, a public document and an agreement between the city and us, the applicant. And so there were missteps made during construction and oversights made during construction, and this is not a typical methodology of doing business. However, I will tell you that, yes, there are changes that are made during construction, especially on buildings that are of this age and in this condition. The one building in particular that I can refer to was down in Monroe Township, where the building had to completely be changed because of the structural conditions of it, such that the exterior of the building looked almost nothing like what was originally proposed, based strictly out of need. Here, similar fashion with the security and the brick and the landscape in the back, and even to a certain extent the canopy, based on making sure that it didn't get wrecked or destroyed, that those decisions were made for what we felt, especially in retrospect, for good and honest reasons. It just wasn't done the appropriate way.
Okay. Mr. Spence, can I have the recommendation?
If the commission is ready for recommendation. With regard to PSP 22-0004, the Planning Department does recommend favorable recommendation of the site plan review request of Loom Cannabis Company to amend the elevations and the site plan. Property located at 26760 Lasser Road, Citral Parcel 2422-102012, on the east side of Lasser Road between the M10 Lodge Freeway and I-696 Freeway, for the following reasons and conditions. The site shall be developed in accordance with sheet C 3.0 dated 5.19-22 by PEA Incorporated. Elevations of the building shall be constructed in accordance with sheet A 301 dated 5/19/22 by Serenity Architecture Company. Approval of this site plan and/or elevations represented herein does not constitute nor guarantee approval for signage. Separate approval and sign permits must be obtained from the building department for any proposed sign. All other conditions of site plan approval PSP 20-0005 shall remain in place. And with the additional condition, the petitioners will meet with the police department for a re-review of their security plan based on the changes made.
To the commission, do I have a motion?
Through the chair, I would move for favorable approval of PSP 22-0004.
We have a motion by Commissioner Willis,
Support?
supported by Commissioner Huntington. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll go to the police department tomorrow, and again, our apologies for the missteps. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, just for a clarification, was there a nay on that?
Yes, there was.
There was?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Ready for approval of minutes? I would.
Yeah, approval. Approval of the minutes.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion for approval of the minutes for 2022 for March the 2nd, March the 9th, March the 16th, March the 23rd, March the 30th, April the 13th, April the 20th, and April the 27th.
I second it.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Ms. Bermudi, motion from Commissioner Huntington, second by Commissioner Bermudi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you, Adam.
If I may, through the chair, now is your opportunity, or the public's opportunity to speak, should they wish to take that.
Is there any public comments? Seeing none, public comments closed. Miscellaneous?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because of the holiday, Memorial Day coming up this weekend, we are seeking to actually cancel the June 1st meeting, which is scheduled for next Wednesday, and then come back to you with your next Planning Commission study meeting on June 8th, 2022. So again, we're seeking a cancellation of the June 1st meeting.
Is there a motion to approve the cancellation request?
I move for, so move.
Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I have nothing more unless City Planner Crowe does.
I don't have anything further to add, thank you.
Time is 8:30. I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.